Well, the COVID-19 pandemic is emotionally taxing. We know many have lost more than one family member at a time to this virus. Others are unable to perform rituals they'd normally do at funerals, which many say helps to deal with the grief and trauma. Well, counselling psychologist Akashni Maharaj joins us now to give us some tips on how we might be able to cope in this time. Akashni, very good morning, and thanks so much for your time. And I think more recently we've been hearing more and more cases, not just of people who've died, maybe it's not COVID-related, others are COVID-related, but you're finding in one family there are several people who are dying just days apart. I mean, how do people cope with this?
You know, it's a difficult time for everyone. And, you know, because of our social isolation and quarantine, it makes it very difficult for individuals to actually attend any type of mourning ritual. And that's a huge anxiety-provoking situation for an individual, because in every culture there's rituals, especially if somebody has passed on, and the rituals pretty much takes them through the whole mourning process. And not being able to do that, there's feelings of guilt that could come about, a lack of closure, and, you know, family members who have been exposed to the virus may be quarantined, which means they're not being able to say goodbye. So it's a very challenging and taxing time for everyone.
Yeah, and on that note of not being able to say goodbye, I mean, when bodies are removed, gone straight from the hospital into a mortuary, you're not able to do what you're supposed to do for a funeral. It really must leave, you know, some lifelong scars. It will leave lifelong scars for many of those, especially when, say, for example, it's a mother and the children have not been able to say their goodbye or spend enough time, you know, with the body saying goodbye.
You know, that's so important. You know, the lack of closure can leave a huge void in an individual's life. And not being able to say goodbye, the bereaved person cannot follow the actual steps in the grieving process. And it takes very long for them. It might take very long for them to actually complete that process. And so, yeah, that is an important step in order for an individual to get past this stage.
So what is it? What would you advise those who are mourning, those who are grieving at this time? We obviously have to change tack. We obviously have to develop a whole new way of thinking around this to avoid, like you say, those feelings of guilt, you know, this void being open for the rest of our lives. What would you advise somebody? How do you approach this? What do you tell yourself every day?
You know, you have to say to yourself that this is an unusual situation and unusual context, and this is the new normal. And the main thing individuals fight with is the lack of control and not being able to control their environment, and acceptance of that fact. I mean, acceptance is going to take a long time to come, but I think every day to be able to understand that things are beyond your control, and we have to weigh it up against that. Some measures have to take place in order for semblance of normality to continue. So it's important that you know, they understand the context of why it's been happening. Don't take it personally. Understand that what they're feeling, their grief is normal. It is valid. And express themselves in a way that is healthy, and, you know, reach out to people even via social media, and just engage with people so that they get that sense of comfort, so that it bridges that void and that gap. But also just to remember that this is an unnatural but new normal for everyone.
And I suppose the other question is, what happens if and when things kind of go back to normal, whenever that might happen? Now, while we're dealing with this, and we know that there are millions going through the same thing, when life kind of gets back to normal, where your mum, your dad, your mother-in-law, your uncle would have been there in the same house with you, you suddenly realize the world has gone back to normal, but my life is never going to be normal because there are these big gaping holes in it. Is that the danger, maybe, at that point, that reality might strike for some people?
No, of course. You know, everything is now delayed, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that everything is being pushed, you know, for an anticipatory. So we're going to anticipate what's going to have to happen. So we're looking at anticipatory grief that's coming about, that how are we going to cope when things get back to normal? How are we going to function? So I think during this time, you know, building up to that anticipatory grief, we need to arm ourselves with lots and lots of support, and coming out of this abnormally normal context, we need to be able to seek out the assistance we need. If it's grief counseling, go for, seek out mental health care, so that you can bridge the gap, and it doesn't become a space where an individual gets into this depressed phase where they can't come out of it, and it becomes clinical depression.
And in many cultures, Akashni, a lot of people have little rituals. I mean, we're Hindus, and we know when somebody passes on for 16 days, there are a lot of rituals that we do every day, every couple of days. There's a special prayer as well. We hold on to those things, even though sometimes we don't understand what they're for. We hold on to them because we know that that is supposed to be good for us and supposed to be good for the soul of the person. So can we sort of do other things instead of what we normally would have done? Can we substitute those?
Yes, I think you can substitute that. The rituals can continue via, whilst you're in isolation, whilst there are many priests that are doing online ceremonials. So you set up in your home, and then you do it virtually. The second thing could be that you follow every procedure, but you just don't have the context of having everybody, together. So you're doing it just like how you would do a Zoom consult, where there's many people on. It won't have that sense of comfort where you are able to hug or hold somebody, but you can still have that sense of community, that sense of belonging. So the only thing that would be missing is that close proximity and the physical proximity of people. But I think if we could have it as a virtual thing, I mean, this is the new norm. And if we can just change our mindset and to understand that rituals are important, and it's very instrumental to support the grieving. And we have to find ways that we can actually complete these rituals, even in an abnormal, normal way.
All right, so find your space and find how you're going to do it. I suppose no ritual is going to be wrong when you're dealing with a situation like this. Thanks so much, Akashni Maharaj, for that. It is indeed a tough time for millions at the moment.